film is about a man named Nick and his wife Maggie, who live a nice life with their two kids, Isisla and Max. One morning, Maggie has a heart attack and is taken to the hospital. She has been there for several days awaiting a heart transplant. Nick's life has been difficult due to his job and parenting children. One evening, he takes the kids to a Cool Industries presentation where they see the Sims, who are intelligent robots that use artificial intelligence to assist people with everyday duties and even difficult tasks. After hearing all the details from the supplier, who assures Nick that the Sims will adjust to their owner's requirements, Nick starts to think about buying one. Isla walks away by herself while Nick is preoccupied. When Nick realizes that, he freaks out, but fortunately, a Sim named Med Alice brings her back. Alice volunteers to watch over Isla while Nick goes shopping, and she even surprises him with a joke. According to the seller, Alice is the newest model with the most sophisticated AI, which enables the Sims to imitate human emotions. They are especially good with children because of this, and Isla wants her. The next morning, Nick is struggling to feed the kids while also taking an important work call. Alice immediately arrives, comes in, and gets to work asking about all of the family's routines while observing that the house is unorganized and the railing on the stairs is weak. Alice quickly absorbs the shopping list from the smart fridge and starts tidying up the house. After Nick leaves to drop the kids off at school, she notices a digital picture frame with the family and Maggie in it. The family returns home at the end of the day to a spotless house and dinner, already prepared. Isla remarks that the lasagna doesn't taste as good as her mother's, and Alice says that she will try to use another recipe next time to make it better. When Max begins to cry, Alice offers to take him away so he won't be a distraction during dinner, but Nick prefers to sit the baby on his lap and simply directs Alice to prepare Max's bath. Alice leans against a wall to sleep. When night falls, Isla sneaks out of the bedroom and climbs a chair in order to reach a cookie jar, but she slips and falls. Nick rushes downstairs as soon as he hears his daughter screaming and the jar smashing. Fortunately, Isla was grabbed by Alice and the child was not harmed. The glass did injure Alice instead, and Nick was surprised to see her bleeding when Nick goes to check on Alice after putting Isla to bed. Alright, let's hit pause before we move on. I need you to hit like and subscribe. No, seriously, I'm not going anywhere until you do done. Let's go. He finds her in the bathroom, nearly nude. He wonders if she needs a repair service, but Alice shows him that she already closed the cut with a special bandage, resulting in an instant heal. Afterwards, the family visits Maggie at the hospital, and Ella informs her that Alice has become her friend. Nick misses Maggie so much that he becomes very affectionate with her, while Maggie is concerned about why Nick chose a female robot. He tells her that because Ella liked her, and also points that he prefers his woman, warm-blooded and sharp-tongued. Later, when Nick returns to the construction site, he and his co-workers observe their supervisor presenting the building to a representative man from a robot corporation. Nick becomes suspicious and speaks with his boss in the lift, who reveals the horrifying truth. The workers are being fired and replaced with Sims due to construction delays. Nick is not dismissed because insurance requires at least one human supervisor on site. However, he abruptly stops the lift and declares that he will leave with friends for support. However, he reconsiders after his supervisor reminds him that he needs the money for the kids and medical expenses, especially now that Maggie is no longer working. When Nick gets back at home, he throws the unpaid bills on the floor and focuses on his kids. Alice picks up the envelopes, realizing how exhausted Nick is, but still listens to Ella and attempts to calm down Max, who's crying. After dinner, Nick drinks working on his car and listens metal music. Alice unexpectedly changes the music to something more relaxing and notices that Nick did not eat much for dinner, causing him to admit that he had an unpleasant day at work. Alice offers a friendly ear and Nick complains about what happened, triggering Alice to call him a hypocrite for choosing a Sim instead of a human for helping him with all tasks. After that, Alice assists Isla in getting ready for bed. Isla wonders if her mother is going to die, and Alice tries to change her mind from thinking that by showing the UV light that she has in her mouth. She then approaches Nick in the living room where he is watching Casablanca. She already knows the story on the movie from the database, but Nick says that seeing it is a different experience and asks her to forget everything she knows about the movie. Alice says her intelligent features come from her memory, and getting rid of it would be the opposite of what she needs, but Nick tells her to go ahead and do it anyway as he is the main owner of her, and she should listen to him. She needs to restart her programming. So Nick presses the power button she has on her neck for 7 seconds. Alice is now watching the film for the first time and learns about the love is so powerful that someone would go to extreme lengths to protect it. A phone from Maggie interrupts the film, announcing that they have discovered a heart and that surgery has been established. The next day, the family visits the hospital and Maggie requests a minute alone with Alice. Maggie is concerned that Nick spends too much time with the kids and does not take good care of himself. So she wants Alice to help Nick be happy, even if it means doing things he dislikes, such as getting rid of the alcohol he hides in the garage. Moments later, the doctor provides bad news. A storm prevents the helicopter carrying the heart from arriving at the hospital, so the procedure is cancelled. Nick tries to console Maggie, but she prefers to be alone for a while. Later at home, Nick continues to drink and rage about what happened. He begins to lose control and attempts to throw the bottle, but Alice stops him by catching his arm. Nick is surprised to feel a pulse in her, the hand, so Alice explains she has an artificial heart since the sound of a beating relaxes a baby. Then, she slides her hands inside his pants and begins pleasuring him while talking about how his pulse and blood vessels are reacting. Alice does not want him to suffer anymore, and Nick initially enjoys it, but he soon breaks out of it and pushes her away. Then Nick goes for a run to clear his mind, but he can't quit thinking about what it would have been like to do everything with Alice. Maggie later lists a bunch of advice. She wants Nick to pass on to their kids at the hospital, clearly losing hope. That night, Nick realizes that the photos of Maggie are missing from the digital frame and confronts Alice about it. She confesses that she removed the Maggie images because they were making Isla upset, but she immediately returns them when Nick asks her to. After that, Nick goes drinking with his coworkers. The entire gang is extremely frustrated since they are having difficulty finding jobs because many companies are hiring Sims instead. When the robot waitress arrives at their table, Mai is disrespectful to her, and Nick objects. The group then leaves the bar and continues to drink in the car. Monty says that they will have some fun and brings them to the building site, stating that he left some tools behind and that no one answered the phone when he tried to look for them. Nick informs him that the area is surveyed, but Monty ignores him while the rest of the party follows him. Monty discovers the container where they keep the sim workers, but the lock needs a password. Nick has the code, but refuses to open it for them. Monty suspects he has his own code and used Isla's birth year. His guess is correct, and inside the container he discovers a group of workers who all look the same. The main sim states that they have no identities, just designation numbers. Moni begins raving about corporations being cold and impersonal before smashing the sim head with a tool. Nick wants to stop him, but the others are holding him back. When Nick goes home, he takes a shower to remove the sim blood. Alice enters with towels, and Nick notices she is wearing Maggie's robe. Alice reveals that Maggie's smell appears to comfort Max, and when Nick asks her to remove it, she does instantly. Nick, who is nervous, tries to escape, but Alice stops him and removes his towel before forcing him to sit down, as she sits onto his lap. Nick attempts to explain he can't do it, so Alice blindfolds him and changes her voice to sound like Maggie. Nick can now get lost in the illusion and pretend to be doing something with his wife. The next morning, Nick wakes up with regret and informs Alice that they cannot do it again. She tries to say that his tension has decreased, but Nick reproaches her, stressing that it is not about desires, but about connection and love. When Nick arrives at work, his supervisor has already called the police since all of the Sims have been destroyed. Nick is accused because his code was used, but he explains that he was in the hospital with Maggie and that his code was AA's birthday, which any friend could have guessed. The boss is not convinced and threatens to terminate Nick if he lies. At that moment, Nick receives a call from Maggie, who is overjoyed because they have finally found another heart. Soon, she is taken to the operating room where all of the doctors are bold Sims with no mouth. Fortunately, the transplant goes well, and Maggie is able to return home in a few days. Her body is still weak, and she is having problems reaching over to pick up Max, so Alice steps in to take him instead. Later, Alice takes Max to the park when she witnesses a spoilt child screaming at his sim nanny, causing Max to wake up and cry. Alice reproaches the child in a rude manner, and all the Sims in the area are shocked, believing her owner has reduced her civility too much. However, Alice clarifies that she wiped civility from her database as a result of Nick's reset and says that this is better. That night, Isla is pleased to eat Maggie's lasagna, and Alice requests the recipe, but Maggie replies it as a family secret. Maggie is not feeling well, so instead of eating, she decides to rest. Maggie wakes up in the morning when she hears Isla shout stop and rushes downstairs, but the railing breaks and she falls on the onstairs. Alice stops tickling Isla and grabs up Maggie to return her to her room. When Nick gets home from work, he finds Alice reading to Isla using Maggie's voice and demands her to stop. Alice describes Maggie's fall, and Nick runs to check on her while Alice informs him that the railing cracked. Nick is suspicious because Alice was supposed to have previously repaired the railing. A few hours later, Nick awakens Maggie up and leads her through a path of candlelight to the garden where he has prepared a romantic dinner just for the two of them. Alice is jealous as she watches them through the window. After dinner, the pair shares a shower and gets messy in bed. Nick does not want to hurt Maggie, so instead of going inside, he uses his tongue. Alice interrupts their special time, saying Isla had a nightmare and wants Nick after Isla is taken care of. Nick walks to the garden and cleans up. Monty returns with a couple drinks and apologizes for the previous night before revealing that his wife has left him. He further claims that cops have been interviewing him and that their supervisor is filing charges for trespassing and causing causing damage to property. Monty believes Nick switched on him to keep his job, and an altercation develops, during which Monty shouts and punches Nick. When Nick tackles him back, Monty soon overcomes him and begins kicking him. Monty grabs a bottle to finish him off, but Alice stops him, breaking the bottle and injuring Monty's hand before sending him flying. She is determined to do more, but Nick stops her. Before leaving, Monty informs Nick that he has time until tomorrow to convince the boss to take down the charges, or he will bring him down with him. Nick then mentions that Sims aren't intended to hurt people, but Alice explains she's programmed to defend her owner. She begins discussing her life with Nick if Maggie dies, and he explodes at her, telling her that she will never be Maggie because she cannot even have scars. Alice grabs a piece of glass and mentions that she can add some if he wants. Meanwhile, Money is at home consuming happy powder and leaving emotional messages on his ex-wife's voicemail while carrying a gun with him. At that point, Alice comes claiming Nick is unaware of her presence and that she cannot allow him lose his job. Monty begins yelling about Sims and shaming her, preparing to shoot her. Alice, on the other hand, reacts quickly and stops his hand before slamming him to the ground and kicking the pistol away. When Monty tries to fight back, Alice throws him through the wall and picks up the gun. Monty Sim then intervene, trying to stop Alice, saying that she must protect her owner. Alice says that she must do the same, resulting in killing the Sim and then shoot Monty too. The next day, Nick returns to work and attempts to convince his boss to get rid of the charges, only to hear that Monty has died. Maggie becomes dizzy at home when she attempts to pick up a book, so Alice does it for her. Maggie wishes to take a bath in privacy, but Alice refuses to leave because she is concerned Maggie may drown. She reveals that Maggie is causing stress for the entire family, especially because she cannot meet Nick's demands in bedroom. When Maggie questions about how she knows this, Alice explains that she knows what Nick's vitals are like when he's satisfied, but her sensors haven't picked it up since Maggie returned. Maggie is furious, so she sends Alice to sit in the garage. Nick returns home moments later and Maggie waits for him before encouraging him to admit the truth. Nick admits that he did it once with Alice and a fight begins, complete with yelling, which Alice overhears by holding her finger on the window. Max begins crying and Alice goes to check on him. Feeling he is a stress, she puts him in the bathtub and begins filling it with water. Isla then wakes up and discovers what Alice is doing. The child informs her parents and they run to the bathroom, but Alice keeps the door closed. While Nick begins hammering the door with a lamp, Maggie climbs out the window and moves on the roof to the bathroom. She tries to grab the infant, but Alice shoves her into the wall. At that point, Nick breaks in and pulls Max out of the tub, giving him to Isla before assaulting Alice with the lamp to rescue his wife. Alice soon stands up with serious bruising to her face and blocks the lamp. When Nick tries to attack her again, Maggie warns Nick to let go and plugs in the lamp, electrocuting Alice. She passes out and the house loses power. Afterward, an ambulance arrives to take Max to the hospital, while a company expert questions about any previous indicators of Alice malfunctioning. Nick apologizes to Maggie, who explains that she needs some alone time before leaving with the kids. Meanwhile, Alice is brought to the repair shop where a technician begins opening her head. The other worker notices Alice's hand moving, but it stops when her memory is wiped out. When they connect it to the computer, they see that there are gaps throughout the software's code. Suddenly, the screens flash, and a message emerges stating that an upload is taking place, indicating that Alice has taken over the text to pull the memory, but Alice is already in the system, so they unplug the computers. However, another message emerges asking, "How do you run from what's in your head?" And one of the technicians is murdered by Alice 2, AS, into which the original Alice's memory was spilt. Then Alice 2 rejects the other technician commands and repeatedly slams her head against the floor before returning to the original Alice. Meanwhile, Nick is drinking at the pub and sends the waiter out because he is a sim. Alice appears unexpectedly speaking, inarticulate due to her facial injuries. She explains that her duty is to make Nick happy and admits to killing Monty before revealing that she is also in the hospital. Nick tries to escape, but Alice grabs him down and hacks the barman with a frozen stare as he rants about his sins. Nick pretends to lovingly touch Alice's head, only to retrieve her memories out. He flees once she stops responding. A doctor at the hospital confirms Max's good health, but Maggie is concerned because he is a robot. Later, Isla hears and follows her mother's voice as the lights change colors. The doctor is frozen and broken bottles litter the floor, but before Isla can follow the voice again, Maggie drags her away to hide. It turns out that the voice is Alice 2, who tries to access the computer and is observed by the nurse. Alice 2 takes the nurse by the neck, choking her to death and stealing her keycard as Maggie and Isla sneak away. Then Alice 2 uses the keycard to locate Max's room in the system. Maggie accidentally walks on some glass, but she doesn't scream. Then Maggie and Isla approach Max and carry him away, just as Alice 2 enters the room. However, Maggie's injury is dripping on the ground and Alice 2 uses her UV light to follow the trail. When she discovers the family, they use an extinguisher to distract her and flee. They forget Maggie's phone, so Nick's calls are missed, but he continues to drive recklessly to get there. Maggie and the kids eventually make it outside where more Sims are frozen. Maggie steals their keycard and enters the ambulance, but Alice too disables the engine system, and then she rips off the door. Then she throws Maggie on top of a car and reveals that she wishes Nick loved her as much as he does Maggie, and maybe, if she would have had her heart, Nick would loved her same. Alice too grabs Maggie by the neck and digs her nails into the operation scar, only to be interrupted by Nick's entrance. Maggie kicks Alice too, and Nick runs over her with his car before crashing. Maggie rushes to get an unconscious Nick out of the burning vehicle, but he seems to no response. Maggie tears down as she attempts CPR to no avail. Suddenly, the car moves and Alice too appears completely burned, her words echoing through the speakers. She gets on top of Maggie and chokes her while removing a piece of metal from her body. When she is about to stab Maggie, Nick hits Alice with a car bumper. Alice drops the metal piece to stop him, and Maggie grabs it and stabs her in the face, successfully shutting her down. The couple reunites, and the other Sims awaken around them the next day. Everyone feels well after some treatment, and they can return home as a family. Meanwhile, the Sim company investigates the repair shop, and when they switch on the power, the broken code appears on the screens. The inspector wants to destroy everything, but his Sim assistants freeze and the computer announces an upload just as another Alice model opens her eyes and the movie ends up. Subscribe for more videos like this, enable notifications, and leave a like to support the channel.